Hi everyone, today I'm looking at a new and rather exciting Samyang lens, the 135mm f2 ED UMC for full-frame or APS-C cameras. It's exciting for three reasons. Firstly, 135mm f2 lenses in general can potentially get you quite stunning images from any distance, particularly portrait shots. Secondly, this Samyang lens only cost around £380 or $550 US. That's pretty affordable, especially when you consider that Canon and Nikon's equivalent lenses cost almost twice as much money, although of course they do have autofocus. Thirdly, this new Samyang lens is rumoured to be incredibly sharp, even better than the established competition. Well, we'll see about that in just a minute. Portrait photographers and event photographers tend to get rather excited about 135mm f2 lenses. They give you a lovely telephoto reach, but still let in plenty of light for working in dark situations or for getting a very out-of-focus background. Professional portrait photographers especially love 135mm f2 lenses because they compress your background so well and the telephoto focal length flatters your subject's facial features. They work particularly well when given a bit of distance from your subject. I love 135mm f2 lenses. They're a challenge to use, but also extremely rewarding when you get your shot. Like all Samyang lenses, this piece of kit is fully manual focus and manual aperture control. I was concerned that it could be really hard to focus a 135mm lens manually. However, if you use live view mode on your camera, it's not a problem, even shooting at f2. Thankfully, this lens's manual focus ring is smooth and precise to use. Let's look a little more at this lens's build quality. Typically for this kind of lens, it's a little bit big and quite heavy, a solid piece of kit. It's based on a metal lens mount and made of a combination of metal and plastic. The lens is dominated by that manual focus ring. As I mentioned, it turns very smoothly and precisely, turning about 180 degrees, with hard stops at either end of the scale. The aperture control ring clicks very positively every half stop, from the widest aperture of f2 down to f16, where there's one more click down to f22. The iris has a generous 9 aperture blades for smoother quality bokeh when the lens is topped down. You'll also be able to buy a cine version of this lens which has a smooth aperture ring. That's useful for professional video makers. And that's it really. It's quite a simple lens that's built very solidly with a well-designed focus ring. Alright, let's take a look at image quality. Firstly, on a full-frame camera, a 20MP Canon 6D. Samyang are famous for making generally very sharp lenses, and if we look in the middle of the image, this is clearly no exception. The resolution and contrast in the middle of the picture are incredible. Let's take a look at the corners. Amazingly, there seems to be no difference. Even at that wide aperture of f2, the lens is razor sharp from corner to corner. Stop down to f2.8 for a little more brightness in those corners. According to the megabyte size of my files, the lens is even resolving a little more detail at f2.8, although it all just looks pin sharp to me. The lens remains this sharp down to f11. So on a full frame camera, the Samyang 135mm f2 turns in an uncompromising performance. I've reviewed around 100 camera lenses in my time, and I believe that this could be the sharpest optic I've ever handled. It's even a touch sharper than a Canon 135mm f2L lens, which is a stellar performer in itself. Let's take a quick look now at how the lens conducts itself on an APS-C camera, my 18MP Canon 60D. Straight from f2 we continue to get a sharp and punchy image in the middle of the picture. And that resolution continues into the corners. Stop down to f2.8 and f4 for tiny increases in contrast and sharpness, although really the lens is sharp whatever you choose to do. So it turns in a fine show on APS-C cameras too. This really has to be one of the sharpest portrait lenses ever made. Let's take a look at distortion and vignetting on a full frame camera. The good news is that there's no distortion at all. Unfortunately though, at f2, we do notice a bit of vignetting or darkness in the corners of the image. However, it does fall quite softly and doesn't make its presence felt too strongly. In fact, if you're shooting portraits, then that gentle vignetting can help to frame your subject. Stop the aperture down to f2.8 and the corners brighten up just fine. Let's look at close-up picture quality now. The Samyang can focus as closely as 80 cm, which is closer than average for a lens in this class. Even at close focus distances, the lens remains extremely sharp, straight from f2. Let's see how it performs against bright lights. Normally, telephoto lenses with a bright maximum aperture really struggle with this, and the Samyang lens shows quite a lot of contrast. However, the flaring itself is quite soft and not too prominent. All in all, it's a little better than average for this kind of lens, and I've definitely seen worse than this before. But still, don't forget to use that lens hood. Here's a nice feature of the lens that I don't normally test. 99% of the time, a lens with a fast aperture will display longitudinal chromatic aberration. The autofocus highlights in front of and behind the plane of focus will normally show some extra colours, often looking green and purple, which degrades the quality of the bokeh overall. Here you can see it on a Canon 85mm f1.8 lens. However, even from f2, this Samyang lens shows almost no longitudinal chromatic aberration. That's a nice accomplishment and makes this a truly apochromatic lens, which is a very rare feature indeed and will improve the quality of the bokeh in your pictures. And on a related topic, the bokeh in general is nice and soft on this lens, an important attribute. Backgrounds melt away quite well, and it's rare to see any highlighting or busyness in the background. Overall, there's really not much more to say. The Samyang 135mm f2 is simply an astonishingly good optic. It's jaw-droppingly sharp, and the overall image quality is pretty strong in every other area too. The low price of this lens means that it could easily open up the world of professional portrait photography to a whole lot of new people. It's great value for money. If you're ready for a manual focus telephoto lens, then this will perform unquestionably for you and get you some wonderful images if used correctly. It certainly comes very highly recommended.